anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
Stand up and fight back. We have started these weekly one-hour protests in front of Mr. Ackerman's office. He has said that the resignation of Dr. Gay at Harvard is not the end of it. They're going to keep fighting to the end DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's declaring a war on all of us, blacks, women, gays. DEI was designed to bring fairness and equality to people that had been historically marginalized and eliminated. So now he wants to go back to where we will not be the ones that are considered for promotions, for employment, in academia and in the corporate world. We're gonna fight back. We're gonna be here every week, and we're gonna keep building. From his office and let him know that we're gonna fight every step of the way. That's right. We started with
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. That is an effort of National Action Network, which Minister Ronald McHenry is in charge of. He's on Zoom. And Ron, I hope you like that roll-in. I represented it well. This is every Thursday at 787 11th Avenue, 54th Street. All right? Ron's the head of all this. Welcome, Minister Ron.
Hey, so yeah, we're meeting every Thursday. They call it DEI Thursdays in front of Bill Ackman's office, which is 787 11th Ave. And we're looking at other buildings. He has a building in London. We're looking at that. And we're just going to continue to stand to say, as he's taking up the fight against DEI, that it's not going to happen without a fight. Him and his right-wing friends have decided to take on diversity, equity, and inclusion after the voting rights has been dismantled in affirmative action. And so we're telling everybody to wake up. They are dismantling our rights that we fought so hard for in the 60s. Currently, as we know, Bill Ackman is on the Federal Reserve Bank Advisory Committee. So we're asking for every role that in every partnership that he's in, for them to remove him, someone who does not believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we know that as far as Harvard University, he was spearheading the movement of the president of voting gay, and also at MIT and others, saying that she was DEI hire despite her record and despite the fact that she was the first black female elected president. And we know that our fight is not in vain. Just recently, he lost the election of his candidates for the board at Harvard. So we know that what we're doing is moving in the right direction. But we need people from all over to come and join in on this fight to make it bigger again. I'm organizing the pickets in front of his building. And we need to continue to say to him, not about time. You will not get rid of DEI.
How can we help?
You can help by supporting, by writing letters, again, to Bill Ackman yourself if you want to, or to media stations, or you can even write letters to your congressperson to tell them how important diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And then you can also join in on the pickets and let us know. You can also email me at rmchenry@nationalactionnetwork.net. Let me know what are your strengths and how would you like to join in on the fight.
Why is this important? We know it.
This is important specifically in this climate of, again, voting rights being removed and women's rights being removed and affirmative action being removed. They are dismantling the rights and everything we gained in the 60s. They are saying that race does not play a role in getting positions. And the reality that this country was built on race-based politics It was against the law for us to be able to read and write. It was against the law for us to participate. And so whenever it seems that we participate and compete, that we thrive, and they are taking the ability for us to be able to go to schools that are going to give us the right type of positioning for a good job. They are taking away our ability to have contracts and compete for contracts. And it's not that Black and people of color own a lot of wealth in this country. They own 95% of the wealth, and they're fighting for the 5%. And so the way they're going, more of us will be in poverty. So we're fighting for our children, we're fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for our grandchildren to be able to compete. We're not asking for a handout. We're just asking to be able to have a chance to play on the same playing field as everyone else.
So people can join us tomorrow at 12 o'clock at 787 11th Avenue. That's 54th and 55th on 11th Avenue.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything else?
We should have a surprise guest tomorrow. So, right, the Red Doctor should show up, and we also have a surprise guest. So, please, everybody, come out and support the fight.
I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be there.
Okay.
Anything
Thank
else?
you very much.
I know you have to run off on us. Or you want to stay behind before we and see what else we have in for you? You have any more time, or are you ready to leave?
Oh, I have to get ready for the rally. So it's always about the rally. But I will be here next week to report our gains, and we're going to continue this fight for the DEI Thursday, especially during this Black History Month. We're going to continue to fight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
What do you think about this DEI, Leroy? Your experience with affirmative action.
What we like to do is show the history of things,
Right.
the continuity of events,
Mm-hmm.
not just a lynching, but how the lynchings have taken place under certain circumstances and through certain individuals. In this case, the pushback on affirmative action is just one of the pieces. That's a visible piece.
Yeah.
The pushback on the DEI, that's a visible piece. What has not been visible to us, but in pieces, is how the Justice Department under Bush Jr., they began to remove, both his terms, they began to remove non-political staff and replace them with political staff, meaning this guy's a Republican, this guy's a Republican, this guy's a Republican, replacing Democrats and Republicans who showed fairness in the activities that they were involved in. You notice that one indicator of it is the Eric Gardner killing.
Mm-hmm.
He was not prosecuted by the Justice Department, even though the evidence was there to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And other cases like that, where there's a number of cases. There's another case in that I believe it's Georgia, where a young brother was murdered, his parents say, in a gym, and they found him in a rolled up gym mat.
Yeah.
And his name is Johnson. And we had the opportunity to interview the father, but they squashed that.
Mm-hmm.
When I say they squashed that, the folks in Georgia. So there have been these atrocities. I'm just mentioning those things. You say, how does that relate to this? Because they are moving on a united front within them, the people who pose themselves as enemies to our progress. And our progress has not been so fantastic that it requires the energy that they're putting into it. But that is indicative of the old saying that they have, if you give, and they use a different word, but if you give a Negro an inch, he'll take a yard. They do not want us to have an inch. They do not, this carries over to education, how they have done certain things in the educational field that eliminates our ability to move up in the education field. These things are connected. They're not just happening. And there are individuals in our society, in America, who have a better grasp on it than I. I just look at pieces. So wrapping up, the affirmative action, when I went into jobs where I got them specifically because of affirmative action, the individuals that I worked with were not that smart and not that great that I was infringing on their ability to do their department's job. I did the job above and beyond, but I didn't know how good I was. And I'm not into an I thing. I just didn't know how good I was because I'm operating on the basis that black people have been in this position, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they know how good we are. We have to know how good we are, and we have to turn negatives into positives. Where they, for example, the demonstration down on 54th Street in front of this guy's office is part of a positive, because what it does, my conclusion, what it does, it enables the younger generations to become baptized in resistance that has an intent, and that's tied to other things. It gives them the opportunity to be baptized in it. As long as we are not getting up out of our chairs and becoming involved in something, the group loses that energy. Once we become involved, now the group has more energy. We're the most dynamic, powerful, creative people in the world. We just have to execute.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my affirmative action job, I had a job where I was a salesman, and most of the other people there were order takers. So when it came time to go out and sell, I blossomed because I knew where to go, and everybody else was from some other place other than New York. So I went out and found the people, and I got some huge accounts. I had a guy I was selling yarn, and this was a big Fortune 500 company selling polyester, nylon, and what was it? A rayon. And they had a time when we were oversold, and everybody else took orders. That's what it was. The sales, you took orders. You didn't have to go out there and actually sell things. So when it came time that the market changed and it was time to go sell, I blossomed because I knew where to go, and this was my thing.
Right.
So I went out and I was the best salesman. I got an award of Salesman of the Year because I was out there selling, actually selling.
I want to build on the first thing that you said, and that is that it became apparent to you when it was going out in the field, that demand to go out in the field, get some orders, that these guys were genuine order takers.
Yeah.
And when you went out into the field, you ran into clients who had not ever seen a salesman from that particular.
That's right, exactly.
Right? And they were so happy to, in your personality,
That's
enable the sales to go. You just didn't go out, but your person, you brought a whole new game, a flavor.
And they weren't out. They couldn't get. They were Southerners, crackers, and they didn't know New York or New Jersey, or they didn't have the familiarity with the people. So I was a natural. I went out to New Jersey and I picked up a customer that was a subcontractor for Sears, and I sold him a 750,000 pounds, one shot, from a plant that had broken down, and they didn't want this yarn to be seen anyplace else. So I found a little where we could hide it, and I was a hero.
There's a book for the audience, and you should do your research. When it's questioned as to our capability, whether it's in academia, whether it's in politics, whether it's in marketing and sales, etc., science.
Mm-hmm.
When that's questioned, there's a book. It's not a large book. It's called Black Life in Corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
Black Life
Yeah.
in Corporate America. It's a small book, and it deals with the exploits of young black men and women, because women were a part of affirmative action, not black men. Women were as much a part of it as the men were. When you read that book, you'll see how dynamic, how extraordinary. It was like the NBA, the guy that can slam dunk after he makes 360-degree turn in the air, flying through the air. That kind of exploit in the area of marketing and creativity, you're going to see that in this book, Black Life in Corporate America, which is, you're going to have to hunt for it. But it's an excellent book, and the two brothers who collaborated on it are worthy of being interviewed by myself, whomever. Black Life in Corporate America.
Yeah. Well, Graham mentioned last week he's 9 years our junior, right, Graham?
What was that? I'm sorry.
I said
9 years.
you're 9 years our junior.
9 years our junior.
Younger. You're 9 years younger than us. So when you came on the scene, affirmative action, Graham said that affirmative action was most, what'd you say last week? That white women benefited
White
most.
women were the largest recipients of
Right.
affirmative
So
action.
9 years later, is that it? Is that,
And the thing is that anytime the government puts a program together, they're not doing it for the benefit necessarily of the people it's supposed to impact.
okay. Yeah.
These programs were to assist people of color in getting into the market.
Yeah.
It did not mean that they were not qualified. It meant that discrimination kept us out of the game.
Yes. That's it.
I experienced it when I was being hired with the transit police. The doctor was telling me that I had a heart murmur. I'm sorry, I gotta tell you have a heart murmur. I'm gonna have to reject you. So I said to him, are you board certified? He says, yes. I said, okay. I said, so you would know the difference between the diastolic and the systolic. And he says, how do you know about that? I said, you went to school, right? He says, yes. I said, and so did I. I have a heart murmur? I was a competitive runner, so I would have been dead before I could have ever met him. And he quickly says, oh, well, don't worry about it. Just go get your hearing checked. I said, wait, are you Oral Roberts? Are you performing miracles? No, just go ahead, don't worry about it. I just looked at him, I said, yeah, so this is what they were doing. You see, you could take the test, you could pass the investigation, but there was a racist doctor to keep black men out.
Right.
Subsequent years, when the women started coming in 1980, they were telling the black women that they had scoliosis of the spine because they don't have a flat behind like white women, as though white people are the prototype for humanity, right? So we had a white guy, his name was Claude Baron. 97% of the blacks and Latinos that came before him in the applicant processing unit never got the job. We got rid of him. And they had to go back and take every case that he had closed or declined the job to, go back and hire those people. And we need to understand that all of this is about race and racism. I don't need to sit at a lunch counter to have a cup of coffee with a white man. I need to understand how racism works beyond the lunch counter. And that's what black people need to wake up to and be able to identify racism when it's right in their face, and for the most part, they don't even understand it.
All right. So I want to run a copy of a revolutionary, one of our pride and joy leaders, and a real black man that stood up for all of us. Run item 4, will you? Happy birthday Malcolm, which was the 19th, right? Malcolm's birthday was February 19th. And we didn't talk about it last week. But hell, this is Malcolm X in 1960s. One item. You enjoy this one about Egypt. And we're going to talk about black history. The Egyptians were black people.
Not Berbers.
Moses and everybody in the Bible were black.
Of these statues that were found over in Egypt, Upper Egypt, of black men that were placed there or carved out of solid granite thousands of years ago.
Did you see Happy?
He didn't ever turn it
With
toward the
Dr.
camera.
J?
He kept it down. Well,
Happy?
I started to turn it toward the camera, but I didn't. I was trying to be polite. And at that point. And but today in the Los Angeles Times on page 2, they have this same picture. You look in today's Los Angeles Sunday Times, and they have a story on page 2 about this temple over in Africa. They call it Egypt, but Egypt is in Africa. And the value of which is so tremendous, it points out how the United Nations is trying to float a loan of around $30 million to save this temple from being covered by the waters that will be brought up by this Aswan Dam that they're trying to build over there. And this thing is so shrewdly done that the average Negro will look at it and read it, and because it says Egypt, he never identifies it with him or him with it. It shows you how shrewd the white man is. But when all you have to do is look at the features of the thing, and you can see, brother, they got all the features that the white man says Negroes have. But because it is associated or connected with something of such value, archaeological and historic, anthropological value, the white man tries to steal it for himself and says, no, these are white people, these aren't black people. And look at this for yourself. Look closely at it, and then, and if you notice, you'll also read in there where the United States is on record as being against putting out the money necessary to save this archaeological wonder. They're against it. And it tells you in the paper that they're against it. They want to let it go on and go beneath the waves. There was a time when America would be for preserving something like that. Because in those days, the black man was so dead mentally, he could look right at it and wouldn't know he was looking at himself. He looked right at it and wouldn't know he was looking at himself. And today, when we see a black man, we know that's a black man. Whether they call him an Egyptian, a Re-Egyptian, or an Ab-Egyptian. Don't care what they call him. All you got to be look like you, he's the same thing as you. And this man that they have here, brothers and sisters, it has nothing but the features of a pure black man. Also, they tell me that there's an exhibition going on in Los Angeles right now somewhere about King Tut. Where is that? Some kind of museum. Where is it? Exposition. Where is it? Oh, Exposition Park. I saw King Tut's mummy tomb when I was in Egypt. And I don't know if they have the same one here, but if you go and see it, you'll find out that this King Tut, whose mummy or sarcophagus, whatever they call it, they have, is as black as this boy. And the white man knows this. Every picture that they have of King Tut, he's not brown. No, he is black, brother, just like this. And the black people who lived in that day had mastered science to such extent, had mastered chemistry to such extent that they could create colors that the dye hasn't faded to this day. Now you know this. The white man got to paint his house every year. You got to paint yours, inside and out. And you haven't got a piece of cloth at home that won't fade if you put it in the sun. But yet these black people back there could make dye that has retained the color, same grade quality, right down to the day from 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. They were master chemists. And this tomb, and I guess this what you call mummy, is gold encrusted. They had so much gold back then. In fact, those were the people who discovered gold. They knew what gold was. White man didn't know what gold was. And they encrusted their mummies with gold and beautiful colors and just laid them there. And finally, when the white man discovered them, he was shook up and wondered, how could these people back so long ago, supposed to be dumb, know so much about so much? Know so much about so many things that he doesn't know about today. And
If you notice the Sphinx nose was blown off by Napoleon in the early 1800s. They had such a white supremacist idea of everything that they couldn't stand the fact that the Egyptians were black. And it showed wherever they went. That's why you see all these noses being
All
blown
them
off.
chipped.
You see did you notice how many of the shots that we saw, the nose was blown off? And if you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Fifth Avenue and 81st Street, you have a whole section there of Egypt.
Right.
And you can see that there were black people. But the Greeks came over and took over and turned a lot of that stuff around. So we have
You
to
know,
understand
Winston,
how we've been bamboozled and lied to. When we were building pyramids, the white man was in the cave, 10,000 BC. So let's go to the black history.
there is an account in the book of Acts. I believe it's the 21st chapter. Many preachers preach about Paul returning to preach in Jerusalem and how the Israelites tried to kill him in Jerusalem and how he was saved by the Roman centurion guard. If you read that chapter between verses 30 and 39 of the 21st chapter of Acts.
He was a Moor?
No, not a Moor. Not a Moor. When he was seized by the captain, they put him in 2 sets of irons and carried him into the castle. And Paul said to the Roman centurion, "May I have a word with you?" But Paul spoke to him in Greek. Paul spoke fluent Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, which was the language of the people at that time.
Right.
Jesus spoke Aramaic, knew Hebrew, but spoke Aramaic. And when Paul spoke to the captain turned around and said, "You speak Greek?" He said, "Sure, I'm a Roman citizen."
Right.
The captain said to Paul, "We thought you were the Egyptian who led the 4,000 men into the wilderness where they were murdered." It's in the book of Acts. He calls Paul an Egyptian. That's the reason why they grabbed him. They didn't grab him to save him. They thought he was the man that led a rebellion where 4,000 people got killed. And the man that led that rebellion was an Egyptian. The man who wrote most of the New Testament was a black man. These white people, these alleged white Christian nationalists, which is a misnomer. There's no such thing as a Christian nationalist because Christianity is a universal faith. It has nothing to do with any nation. If they knew that Paul was a black man, their heads would explode. If they knew that in Edinburgh, in the writings in Edinburgh, going back to the 17th century, they made mention of King James as a tawny. A tawny, T-A-W-N-E-Y, in Old English is a Negro. The man who translated the Bible text in 1611, who was the King of England, who was of the House of the Stuarts, who ruled England for 348 years, was a black man. That is history. We know that Scotland is named after Scota, who was the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. She left Cairo to worship one god. A flotilla came out of Cairo, went west on the Mediterranean, and turned up into the North Atlantic. And she settled in an area that they now call Scotland. And she is the patron saint of Scotland, Scota. Her paintings show a black woman. When Issa and I were in Spain last year, we were in the Pyrenees Mountains outside of Barcelona. And there were people from all over the world coming up into this mountain to see the shrine of the Black Madonna.
Right.
Not a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman. They came from Asia, South America, the United States, Africa. Thousands of people were lined up to go into the cathedral of the Black Madonna. if you stay in the United States, you won't know anything.
That's it.
Beautiful.
That's
You won't
it.
know a thing. You've got to travel back. In my travels in England and France and Italy, I didn't see a white Jesus when I was in Europe.
That's right.
I didn't see one,
That's right.
especially in Italy.
Hmm.
I have a photograph of the Pope kneeling and praying before the Black Madonna.
Yeah.
The Black Madonna. That's the Pope. They know the truth. But
Well-
here, these people propagate a fraud.
Well,
And with that, I have to say goodnight. I've got to get to this class. But we have to do, I'm going to send you some stuff, Winston and Leroy, on a piece that I did at a church in Brooklyn last weekend. It'll blow your mind. The truth about our people, the history. Oh, real quick and I'm gone. This movie, Oppenheimer.
Oh, yeah.
There's one black person in the cast, one. And I don't even know what his part is. One. There's 140 some odd people in the movie. But on the Manhattan Project, there were 17 black men that worked on that project.
17.
Scientists and technicians.
Yeah.
And you're not going to see one of them represented in the movie. So much for the Academy Awards.
Yeah. Always bamboozling, always making us what we're. You know, it's interesting. Well, we witnessed it
Peace.
ourselves, you know, because Cleopatra, Elizabeth Taylor's Cleopatra, or Tarzan, never getting a suntan. It's laughable. And thinking of the pyramids being made out of brick, and there's not one brick in the pyramids. It's all solid limestone. The way the pyramids were built. Well, you off, Graham? You have to leave us? Well, let's do another roll-in. We'll come back to the rest of us that are left over. One item 3, and we'll talk a little bit about Gaza and the struggle of the Palestinians. One item 3.
On which side of Jerusalem would I have decided to live? Muhammad Ali also declared his support for the Palestinian struggle, marching for Palestinian rights and visiting a Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon. In 1979, Reverend Jesse Jackson met with the PLO and pushed for the US to deal directly with the organization in pursuit of a peace deal.
Just and lasting peace is inextricably bound for a state, for Palestinian people, and the recognition of the PLO as the government in exile with which our nation must negotiate.
This was a significant shift in support for Palestine, moving from radical groups to more mainstream figures who were able to lobby for shifts in US policy. 10 years later, Jackson would find himself in an audience in Harlem as Nelson Mandela addressed a packed town hall.
As far as Yasser Arafat is concerned, I explained to Mr. Sidney that we identify with the PLO because just like ourselves, they are fighting for the right of self-determination.
Like Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu drew global attention to the plight of Palestinians as being parallel to that of black South Africans under apartheid.
The inhumanity that won't let ambulances reach the injured, farmers tend their land, or children attend school. This treatment is familiar to me and the many black South Africans who were corralled and harassed by the security forces of the apartheid government.
Mandela made a historic trip to Palestine in 1999.
Choose peace rather than confrontation, except in cases where we cannot proceed, where we cannot move forward. Then, if the only alternative is violence, we will use violence.
A statue of Mandela stands in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah, a gift from South Africa to the people of Palestine. His grandson, Mandla Mandela, continues to be an outspoken critic of Israel.
Release all political prisoners. We want to say to the Israeli government today that give the 6 million Palestinians living in exile their right of return.
It's not possible to talk about global black solidarity for Palestine without discussing black Palestinians or Afro-Palestinians themselves. Some Afro-Palestinians trace their roots to the land as far back as the 12th century and are descendants of Muslim pilgrims who went to Mecca for Hajj and then settled in Jerusalem. Others are the descendants of those who migrated from places such as Nigeria, Sudan, Senegal, and Chad. Some of them came to Palestine specifically to fight against British colonialism and Zionism.
The second, third, fourth generation, if you ask us to identify ourselves, we say we are Afro-Palestinians. We were born here, we grew up here.
The community is deeply rooted in Jerusalem, with a long history of involvement in the Palestinian liberation movement. Ali Jidda is a leader of Jerusalem's Afro-Palestinian community who served 17 years in Israeli prisons as a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
The African community used to be always among the avant-garde. For example, the first Palestinian female to be put in Israeli jails came from the African Quarter.
This was Fatima Bernawi, a Palestinian of Nigerian descent who served 10 years in Israeli prisons. Released in a 1977 prisoner exchange, she was the highest-ranking female member of Fatah. The first Palestinian killed during the Second Intifada in 2000 was Osama Jidda, an Afro-Palestinian shot on his way to donate blood.
Surprise, huh? There are blacks in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
This is the struggle of all oppressed people. The Palestinians, they're up to killing, 30,000 by now, or more. Now they're in the south of Gaza, cornered between the ocean and Egypt. And there are 1 million refugees down there about to be attacked. If the Hamas doesn't give up the hostages, they're threatening, Israel's threatening to attack the southern part of Gaza. Now, what's going to happen? I think we as American blacks should be on Biden's back to demand a ceasefire. They just vetoed the demand for a ceasefire in the UN yesterday. So why aren't we protesting in the streets? I mean, black people. We have to get on Biden. If he wants the black vote this November, he has to take care of the Palestinians. This is a human thing.
Correct.
This is far from godly.
Correct.
This is the demon Netanyahu killing off people to stay in office. And never mind, there's oil and gas off the coast of Gaza, which we have mentioned here. And we had Rabbi Weiss on here telling the history of the Zionists. So where do we go from here?
There is opposition within not only the black community, but in the so-called general community. There is a letter, according to what I understand, 1,000 ministers have signed off on against what's going on in Gaza right now. What we are confronted with is the mobilization of media to not give access to these opposition pieces. So we are walking around not knowing.
It's on Democracy Now!, free speech TV.
Yeah.
That's the only place you can find it. If you watch it often enough, it makes you sick.
Right.
I had to turn it off. I got nausea watching all the murdering and mayhem in Gaza. I mean, really, it's inhumane. I mean, I'm wondering where God is in this all. This show him the way or something. We need a miracle, or for us to wake up, spiritual people. It's really,
This Sunday, February 26th, is Savior's Day
okay.
in the Nation of Islam, and that's when Minister Farrakhan makes an annual presentation,
Yeah.
and the focus this Sunday is Gaza,
Oh,
the war in the
fantastic.
Middle East. And folks can plug in by way of noi.org on Sunday, approximately 2, 3 o'clock, but the time is given on that website, noi.org, this Sunday. So when he makes when he makes any kind of statement of note, black people who are interested have to plug in, because you're not going to see it in the so-called daily papers.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening now. You know, even the demonstrations on Thursday, those have to be participated in by myself, by others. We have to be present in order to get exposure in even black media, and it's not that many black media vehicles around.
Not like it used to be.
You know, we have to really stretch to get it in. Our presence is much appreciated and needed by the younger folks.
Graham's gone. So,
Brother Graham?
I think he's gone.
He's gone?
Yeah.
Okay, because I wanted to know his sources. You know, he quotes from the Bible a lot of facts and figures as it relates to black people, black history, and you know, it's of interest to me where he got that education, that pathway to understanding that the Bible is really talking about us.
Yeah. Yeah. Reverend Minister McHenry often quotes the Bible.
Also, I don't know how much time we have, Brother Gilchrist, but there is, it's not being
15
publicized,
minutes.
but there is a movement, not an organized movement, a movement to appreciate the existence of God among various populations in the world. And in China, it's the personification, not the personification, but the focus is getting back to Buddhist principles. It's one of those things that's quietly mentioned but not delved into, but people like ourselves who are saying, I'm talking about like ourselves, we're saying that our young people here, the generation that's being consumed with this, you know, the distractions, that the majority of them appear to be missing God, missing the appreciation of a God existence, and how that existence of a God translates into the God within the human beings, fellow human beings. And I'm just mentioning it because it's not going to be followed up on in the general media, but there's something in the air as it relates to the appreciation of a supreme being.
Which we've lived long enough to know and been through enough struggling, being black in America, that there has to be a God. How will we survive with these 400 years? I watched something about, you know, this being Black History Month, it's so profound that during our era, the 50s, the 40s and 50s, we're both born in 1941, and being born and raised in Harlem in the 40s, when you look at Europe at the same time, 42, Hitler had taken over all of Europe. And there was mayhem. And we were in the tail end of a Harlem Renaissance.
Right.
I remember in Harlem in the early 40s, man, it was love energy all over the place. People cherished kids. I remember a kid walking into You might remember this place, the Victoria Theater,
Right.
on 125th Street, across the street from Bloomstein's. They had this photo shop where you go take pictures.
Mhm.
I remember walking in there, I must have been 2 or 3, and I walked in, and I was with my sister and my mother, and we sat down to take a picture, and all the people were looking at, look at these 2 kids. I mean, they fussed over so much. And then I realize now that there was a war going on in the rest of the world, and we, as black people, were enjoying America at its best. Segregated society, but trolley cars on 125th Street. And Reverend Sharpton was talking about last Saturday about Clayton Powell doing a boycott on Con Ed.
Right.
Because they didn't employ any black people. And this is in the 40s.
Right.
And that people came in and turned in pennies.
Right.
And I came to tears because I remember walking with my mother carrying pennies to Con Ed. I mean, and you look at our history, the way we were raised in Harlem. I mean, it was a loving energy. I mean, black people at their best. I just remember all that. As a kid, I mean, people treasured us. I mean, every adult was your parent back in those days. I mean, how many black people were raised like us? Now, we remember as teenagers, the Sugar Bowl and all that stuff.
Right.
We were clean as we are today. In the 50s, we're talking about 55, 56, 57. I got out of high school in George Washington High School. It was 50% black and 50% white. And Jewish kids liked us more than anything else because we sang. And all the girls swooned when we sang. Dua, love energy. Well, that's what we represented. And I just remember and treasured those days when we weren't gangsters or thought about being gangsters. Of course, there were a few amongst us, but that love energy that we always had, and then the ambition to be better than we were purported to be. I mean, you had the same experience because we hung out on the same corner.
Same corner.
The
Same
Sugar
corner.
Bowl. And further down the block, we had Jocks and the Red Rooster, which the Red Rooster's on 125th Street now. But that was a political scene back in those days.
Right.
And across the street was Abyssinian Baptist Church and the Rennie.
The Rennie Ballroom.
Rennie Ballroom.
And
But
around,
just in
around
that
the corner was this, the Savoy, was it Savoy?
Savoy was on 42nd Street. But
Um,
Strivers Row was on 139th Street with
yeah.
all the brownstones.
No, that history is very, very important for us to chronicle because so many great people came out of the groups that we had formed.
Mm-hmm.
And great people, great in our community and great outside. There's a brother, Vozar.
Vozar Rivers.
Vozar, he's responsible for the connection between Cuba and the black community. The artists coming over at one point. You know, hey, you
And
know,
Lloyd Williams. Lloyd Williams too.
Lloyd Williams.
Had a lot to do with Cuba.
And they had the Lloyd, Vozar, Causey,
Yeah, Causey. He's
David
still
White,
around.
Luther Gales, all had a harmony in working together, even to
Yeah.
this day.
Yeah. Well, we had social clubs back then.
Well, you
Back
had
then.
you had the club that I belonged to, the Squires Limited.
We had the
Amen,
layman.
amen. You
I
had the
had the
casual
layman
wear.
shoes.
Yeah. You know, and we put on the biggest dances.
Yeah.
And
That was our hustle, giving social
right.
dances. And
That's
well, we had
right.
a contest for Queen of Les Messieurs and
Les Messieurs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a princess contest for the prettiest girl in the club. I mean, in the neighborhood, and the reward was a trip to the Penn Relays.
You know, those are the days of dances at St. Charles.
Yeah.
And Jackie Robinson, the YMCA Annex.
Yeah.
Across the street from the YMCA. I think that's called the Jackie Robinson Annex, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they would dance. You came there, it was as though James Brown was appearing.
Yeah.
Just a huge crowd of us living in harmony and working together. Those are things that is important for our younger generation to know about, to know what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a great blessing that we are able to sit here and talk about that today. And going to the Renaissance, that was a family affair. Going to the Renaissance in
taking food.
Rockland Palace.
Yeah.
You brought your food, you brought your bottles. That was, and you paid for a table.
Yeah.
And
but you brought your own food.
Yeah, folks collaborated. It was a very
that was a big,
community.
huge place too.
Community.
I forgot the capacity of that. It must have been 500, maybe. The Rennie was huge. It was a whole block.
Yeah, yeah.
I wish Bev was here. I walked her home from the Rennie in '58 when we met.
Man,
that's funny. But what we're talking about is the beauty of being black in America and not being appreciated by black people, because we've been bamboozled and told all these many lies, and it still exists today. The youth of today are misdirected. Well, you just bring in all the weaponry that's been thrown at us. You know, coke and crack destroyed a lot of minds and temperaments and a lot of lives. And that was arranged, I like to call it planned genocide. Reagan came in, Carter was president. Reagan bamboozled the hostages to let them release after the election. He made a deal with the Arabs to let the hostages go. Carter was low-key and he wasn't as aggressive as Reagan. We're talking about 1980, when everything changed. I think that was a change of black America right there. The planning of crack in the West Coast between the Bloods and the Crips. And that started to end a war between black people, fighting over this and killing each other. When we start killing each other with drugs, fighting over making money, selling crack to each other. What did that do? Destroy our minds, our spirits, and everything else.
I'm glad that you brought that up with whatever time is left. And that is, we talked earlier about the pushback on the affirmative action, et cetera. That's happening over here, and at the same time, on this side is mass incarceration.
Yeah.
Which is not something that was created because we're bad people, but because their thing is to depopulate us. Taking young guys and putting them into in jail at the time when they're reproductive years. And see, when you look at the entire picture, then maybe that is a mobilizing factor among us as a people to see this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and how all of them are related. And they're coming from the same source. Then you had the bell curve, which allegedly was to show black people as inferior mentally and non-capable.
Right.
And Brother Graham mentioned that in the movie Oppenheim, there's about 144 actors or whatever. There's only one black person, and the Manhattan Project, which was the project that produced the atomic bomb, there were blacks working on that project, and one of them was Dr. Aleem Shabazz. He's the mathematician who produced the most black PhDs in math and science. And he said, I was working on the Manhattan Project and didn't know it. He said, I didn't know it until he's at a school, teaching at a school, and they brought a formula for him to solve because he was the one who was capable of solving. In other words, not the school, but not the Manhattan Project now, but this is after the Manhattan Project. He didn't know that he was working on that he had worked on the Manhattan Project until this group of individuals, scientists, brought a problem for him to solve. That's the way he put it.
Mm-hmm.
So that there are folks who are they're working this piece, which is what you do, and he was one of them. And Dr. Aleem Shabazz, he caught the most hell from black schools, the administrations in the black schools that he was at. Clark, Lincoln in Pennsylvania, he was suing at the time that he made his transition, and he did not he did not believe or practice what do you call oh man, when when students are, oh God, it just slipped my mind. It starts with an R, and they're like behind in class but not up with the class. He would put everybody together, the ones who were ahead and the ones who weren't ahead. I said, well, what does that do? He said, you pull them up at the same time. You don't make one part of the group think that they're inferior to learning.
Yeah.
He said, you teach them at one time and they'll come up together. And that was his mantra when he passed. Good brother.
Mm-hmm.
Really good brother. But anyway, he worked on the Manhattan Project and didn't know it.
Well, I'm sorry we didn't get more Black history in there, but we got enough. And we will return next week with more information and love energy so we can inspire the planet, become more loving, more godly, and freedom for the Palestinians. That's a human cause, because God is real. And the God in me loves the God in you. And the devil in us will take care of the devils that are out there with spiritual energy. Now, Netanyahu has to be the one Netanyahu and Trump, rid ourselves of the demons amongst us. And with that, peace and love, and God be with you.
And thank you for the
Power
show.
to the people. God bless.
Indeed. Thank you for the opportunity, brother.
Always, brother.
Yeah. This show is very important.